Welcome to the Resource Nexus podcast. Today we're breaking down the 2026 mock coaching carousel and who we think is getting fired, moving on, moving up, moving down, and the out-of-nowhere moves that might just surprise everyone. These are our educated, logical guesses. This year's mock coaching carousel featured 59 movements, which is right in line with what we've traditionally seen in recent seasons. For the full article and all the details, check out theresourcenexus.com. Now let me make this clear right up front. This is a fully hypothetical exercise. We ran a similar simulation last year, and while only a few coaches landed in the exact positions we predicted, many of the moves and openings we anticipated actually did happen, and they were within the right range. The pool of job openings and candidates should look pretty similar to what we've compiled here based on our preseason projections, but for 2026 we've added a few more options. These are based on season forecast, and they highlight coaches we expect to excel, rise in prominence, or be well-positioned for a move. We're using a full simulation that factors in logical opportunities, career trajectories, salaries, and work history. The goal is to provide a realistic preseason look at how the college basketball coaching carousel could potentially unfold next spring. If you want the deep justifications for why we expect certain jobs to open, you can check out our Hotseat Rankings. All right, let's jump into the fun part. North Carolina, out Hubert Davis. In Chris Collins. Now, this one is unlikely, but it really should happen. Collins spent nearly 2 decades within 10 miles of Chapel Hill at Duke, and he may feel he's taken Northwestern as far as it can possibly go. I rank him as the 26th best coach in the country. And let's be honest, UNC probably isn't going to land anyone better. Just look at Kentucky's surge. NIL has made it less urgent for top coaches to move, as long as they're being supported at the same level. And that's not changing anytime soon unless Scott Drew decides Baylor can't keep pace with the elite guys. Pride probably stops this move from happening, but here's another way to look at it. It could be a stick-it-to-Duke move for UNC. Imagine if Collins came in and actually outperformed John Shire. Collins may still feel slighted that he never got the Duke job. And hey, he could even live in the same city he did for 18 years. Of course, Duke friends might disown him. But UNC, that's a great opportunity. Other options for UNC include Scott Drew, Mick Cronin, Jamie Dixon, Jared Calhoun, and Brian Hodgson. Ohio State, out Jake Diebler. In Mick Cronin. Cronin is an Ohio native, and honestly, he seems frustrated with UCLA's travel demands and the overall support structure out there. If he was willing to leave his alma mater, Cincinnati, I think he'd also be willing to leave UCLA, especially for a better job back home in Ohio, where he's always seemed more comfortable. Now, Tony Skinn and Ryan Pedon are both former assistants here. That might give them an outside shot, but this time round, I think Ohio State is going to look for a hire that really reflects the elite level of this job. Other possibilities include Tony Skinn, Chris Mack, Jared Calhoun, Brian Hodgson, Chris Collins, and Ryan Pedon. UCLA leaving Mick Cronin, taking over Jamie Dixon. Dixon is a TCU alum, but he's also from Los Angeles. He's taken TCU as far as he can, and at this stage, he may be looking to make one last push for a national title before retirement. Think of it as a hire similar to Al Ford, someone with local ties and connections to legendary coaches, in this case Howland. Other options to watch: Chris Gerlufsen, Russell Turner, Chris Collins, Jared Calhoun, and Brian Hodgson, Oklahoma. Departing Porter Moser, landing the job. Brian Hodgson. Oklahoma could very well be the best SEC-style job available, and I think Hodgson would be interested. He's already familiar with West Central Arkansas from his time at Arkansas State, so the region doesn't faze him. Another candidate to keep an eye on here is Jared Calhoun. Syracuse, exiting Adrian Autry, stepping in Tony Skinn. Syracuse is likely ready for a true clean break from the Boeheim era. Their ideal target might be Brian Hodgson, given his New York ties, but let's be real. They might be disappointed if that one doesn't pan out. The ACC isn't what it used to be compared to the SEC, and that plays into Skin's potential move. Skin has been a solid up-and-comer, and it would probably take a top-tier job like Syracuse to get him to leave his alma mater. Other options, Chris Mack, Brian Hodgson, Jared Calhoun, Russell Turner, and Chris Caputo. LSU. Moving on, Matt McMahon coming in, Porter Moser. Think of this as a Mike White-style parachute hire within the conference. Moser could use a fresh start, and LSU definitely doesn't want to be embarrassed anymore. Another potential hire could be Chris Gerlufsen, since Florida's success with his former boss, Billy Donovan, shows he can thrive at a high level. Other names to keep an eye on: Brian Hodgson, Jared Calhoun, and Chris Gerlufsen. Pittsburgh out Jeff Capel III, taking over Chris Mack. Mack is from nearby Cleveland. He didn't deserve to be fired at Louisville. His Xavier record was impeccable, and he did a very good job overall. Now he's likely poised to land a quality job, as long as Charleston has a decent season, of course. He might be comfortable staying in a mid-major that pays well, so it's going to need to be a program like Pitt to pull him out. Other options: Brian Hodgson, Jared Calhoun, Russell Turner, and Chris Gerlufsen. Cincinnati leaving Wes Miller, taking over Jared Calhoun. This one seems obvious. Calhoun is a Cincinnati alum, a former student assistant, and an Ohio native. He knows the program and the city inside and out. Another fun option here. Chris Mack. It would make for an interesting story as well. Rutgers, departing Steve Pekiel. Landing the job, Chris Gerlufsen. Keeping an eye on Gerlufsen at San Francisco. He's consistent, connected, and sometimes even outperforms expectations. While he's often pegged as a West Coast guy, he's actually from the East Coast, like Russell Turner. Don't be surprised if he ends up back in the Northeast as a Pennsylvania native. Rutgers has the resources to make this a solid landing spot. Other options: Chris Mack, Russell Turner, Porter Moser. South Carolina, moving on, Lamont Paris, stepping in, Greg Marshall. Marshall's buyout with Wichita State ends this year, and he reportedly looked at Coastal Carolina a couple years ago. I think he's ready to make a comeback, and this is the SEC. Everyone's in an arms race, and hires like this happen. The big question: has he been out of the game too long? Sometimes you've got to do what it takes to win in a conference like this. Other options: Chris Mack, Brian Hodgson, Russell Turner. Memphis out, Penny Hardaway. Coming in, Steve Forbes. This feels a bit like the Tubby Smith scenario, someone coming in after struggles, but Forbes knows the state and has recruited Memphis heavily. I actually think it could be a very good fit. Maybe even a better situation than Wake Forest, where he hasn't done poorly. He just stalled. Memphis needs someone who can recruit 4- and 5-star talent and navigate the portal. I could see Forbes parachuting in if he's not fired elsewhere. Other options: Bryce Drew, Chris Mack, Kamani Young, Luke Murray, Kevin Ollie, Wes Miller, Arizona State, leaving Bobby Hurley. Landing the job, Bryce Drew. Grand Canyon has great resources and is moving up to the Mountain West, but Drew stalled a bit there, which might push him to move up while he can. This is the kind of school that would hire a Moser Doctrine coach, a once-fired guy with upside. Other options: Russell Turner, Chris Gerlufsen, Wake Forest. Out Steve Forbes, taking over Russell Turner. Turner is the model of consistency. He could coach anywhere in the nation if he chose to. He's an East Coast guy from Virginia, which makes this a very logical landing spot. Other options: Wes Miller, Takayo Siddle, Bob Ritchie, Richie McKay, Greg Marshall. Northeastern, departing Chris Collins. Stepping in, Brian Wardle. Wardle is from Illinois, coaches in Illinois, and this is a gettable job in the state. He's known for doing more with less, which is exactly what Wardle needs. Ideally, they'd target James Jones at Yale, but there's no indication he'd leave. Other options: James Jones, Ryan Pedon, Dan Earl, Richie McKay. TCU, moving on, Jamie Dixon. Landing the job, Scott Cross. Texas guy, Texas job. That's really all there is to it. Cross probably deserves it after the UTA situation a few years back. TCU will want bigger targets, but realistically, they probably won't land them. Other options: Nevada Smith, Luke Barnwell, Anthony Grant, Georgia Tech, leaving Damon Stoudemire, taking over Chris Caputo. I don't think Caputo is a superstar coach, but I expect him to have a solid season with what he returns and use it as a springboard to a better job. This ACC opening makes sense given his time at Miami. Other candidates to watch include Anthony Grant or Wes Miller, either as parachute hires or if they were recently fired. Other options: Wes Miller, Chris Mack, Anthony Grant, Kevin Ollie. Virginia Tech, out, Mike Young. Stepping in, Wes Miller. Miller didn't do a bad job at Cincinnati, but it feels like a change is coming. Blacksburg seems like a natural landing spot, just over an hour north of Greensboro, where he's from and coached for many years at UNCG. It's a nice fit, whether it's through a firing or a parachute hire. Other options: Takayo Siddle, Bob Ritchie, Richie McKay. UCF departing Johnny Dawkins, landing the job Kevin Ollie. Ollie's show cause is over, and UCF likely doesn't care. They need to win, and say what you want, but he has a national title. Sure, it didn't end perfectly, but UCF officials saw the good as well. He's also been an NBA interim head coach, which adds to his resume. Honestly, name all the truly bad coaches with a national title. Other options: Luke Murray, Greg Marshall, Richie McKay, Seton Hall. Moving on, Shaheen Holloway, taking over Luke Murray. This isn't a glamorous P5 job, but it's the kind of stepping stone most top assistants, even the cream of the crop, usually take if they want a P5 head coaching shot from the start. Murray has been patient, and this could be his break. Other options: Kevin Ollie, Takayo Siddle, Mitch Henderson, Kimani Young. Boston College, out, Earl Grant. Stepping in, Kimani Young. Much like Murray, Young has been patient. He also has a little personal history to navigate, which might come up in interviews, but this seems like a logical next step for him. Other options: Takayo Siddle, Luke Murray, Mitch Henderson. Wichita State, leaving Paul Mills, taking over Ryan Pedon. I went with Pedon because he seems poised for a very strong season. This will likely be a sought-after high major job. Expect Kansas native and D2 coach Brett Ballard to be in the mix as well, along with some top assistants. Other options: Luke Murray, Kimani Young, Utah State. Departing Jared Calhoun, landing the job Mike DeGeorge. This is the ultimate jump seat job. Low major coaches getting a fast track to P5 opportunities. DeGeorge could be next in line. Bob Ritchie should probably try for this one too. Coaches with no ties often land here and are in a P5 job within a year. Other options: Luke Barnwell, Nevada Smith, Grand Canyon. Out, Bryce Drew. Stepping in, Casey Shaw. I'm going internal here. Many athletic directors follow the "if it's not broke, don't fix it" philosophy. Still, this would be a very sought-after, resource-rich, high-mid major job if it ever hit the market. Other options: Wes Miller, Steve Forbes, Nevada Smith, Luke Barnwell, Luke Murray, USF. Moving on, Brian Hodgson. Landing the job, Takayo Siddle. This feels like the kind of job Siddle would need to take to move up. Look for him to try a low-level P5 job, like Boston College or Seton Hall, or a top AAC/A10 position like this one. He reportedly tried for USF last year. He's never left North Carolina, so this makes sense. This job would also suit someone like Richie McKay, if he ever chose to leave. George Mason, out, Tony Skinn. Taking over, Dave Klatsky. Klatsky is currently a Florida assistant, and he took his D3 team to the national title game last year. I expect a short stay in Gainesville given his pedigree, and this could be a great stepping stone. Other options: Greg Marshall, Kevin Keats, Kyle Neptune, J.D. Byers, Davidson. Departing, Matt McKillop. Landing the job, Justin Gainey. He might wait for Rick Barnes to retire, but I don't think he'd get that job immediately. Likely needs to land at an A10 or AAC program first. Other options: Greg Marshall, Kevin Keats, Brett Ballard. Charleston, moving on Chris Mack. Stepping in, Bob Ritchie. Needs a fresh start after stalling at Furman in the NIL era. Charleston has resources, pays like a top 100 job, and could be the bridge that helps him restart and reach his past success. Other options, Greg Marshall, Tulsa, leaving Eric Conkle. Coming in, Brett Ballard. Ballard is from Kansas and has coached there for most of his career outside of following Danny Manning to Tulsa and Wake Forest. I'd expect him to aim for Wichita State, but Tulsa is a solid landing spot. If he wants a shot at the Kansas job after Self, he needs to get to D1 sooner rather than later. George Washington, out Chris Caputo, landing the job, Kyle Neptune. It didn't go perfectly at Villanova, but it really wasn't that bad. I think he'll find another job in this range, back in the A-10 where he started. Other options, Dave Klatsky, Greg Marshall, Kevin Keats, J.D. Byers, UTEP. Departing, Joe Golding. Taking over, Luke Barnwell. Golding was a top prep coach and is currently on staff at nearby Texas Tech. This seems like a logical move, with Tech poised for another good season and placing assistants into similar level head coaching jobs. Other options, Nevada Smith, Charlotte. Moving on, Aaron Fearn. Stepping in, Bart Lundy. Lundy, a former Queens coach, has spent most of his career in the Carolinas, particularly in Charlotte. This makes him a natural fit. Other options, Greg Marshall, Kevin Keats, Brett Ballard, Lamont Paris. San Francisco, out Chris Gerlofson. Landing the job, Michael Plank. Internal hires have worked well here, so expect them to keep going to the well. Other options, Mike DeGeorge, Joe Pasternak, East Carolina. Leaving, Michael Schwartz. Taking over, Dustin Kearns. ECU pays well and provides more resources and conference exposure, making it an attractive landing spot. Other options, Greg Marshall, Kevin Keats, Brett Ballard, Lamont Paris, Bart Lundy. Fresno State. Departing, Vance Wahlberg. Landing the job, J.D. Luster. Luster, an assistant at San Diego State in Arizona, fits the bill. Fresno is moving to the reformed Pac-12, and while they make unusual hires sometimes, this one makes sense. Other options, Joe Pasternak, Mike DeGeorge, Bradley. Out, Brian Wardle. Stepping in, Nevada Smith. Smith, a former G League and D3 head coach, is currently an assistant at Marquette. This seems like a strong opportunity at a winning program. An internal hire could still happen, however. Other options, Greg Marshall, Brett Ballard, Terry Johnson, Rod Clark. Illinois State, leaving Ryan Peden, taking over Terry Johnson. A Purdue assistant on a likely number. One team should be in line for a head job if he chooses to leave. Other options, Greg Marshall, Brett Ballard, Rod Clark. Let's move further down the coaching carousel and talk about some mid-major and lower major moves that are equally fascinating. UNCW outgoing Takayo Siddle, incoming Kevin Keats. This one seems pretty straightforward. Keats still owns restaurants in Wilmington years later, so the ties are strong. I wouldn't be shocked if Keats takes the helm here again. If he doesn't, Joe Pasternak also interviewed for this job once before and might circle back. If not them, I'd expect some of the familiar NC names. San Diego, outgoing Steve Lavin, incoming Joe Pasternak. San Diego might look like a lower tier job on paper, but it's actually nicer than it seems. A great city and decent resources. Pasternak has stalled a bit recently, and this could be an ideal opportunity for him to reset. His name even came up for Louisiana last season, so this is very much seems to be looking. UC Irvine. Outgoing Russell Turner. Incoming Ali Tan. You can legitimately win in Irvine. That makes it an attractive situation for any coach. I'd expect an internal promotion here, given how successful Irvine has been over the years. Although they have been successful enough, their assistants have moved on. Chattanooga. Outgoing Dan Earl. Incoming Lamont Paris. Even if Paris, he still has value. I suspect Chattanooga would welcome him back with open arms. The SEC is just a buzzsaw. It's not like South Carolina was terrible recently. This would be a solid landing spot for him. Appalachian State, outgoing Dustin Kearns, incoming Jeremiah Samaripas. Samaripas was a Wofford assistant who had great success at Lincoln Memorial as head coach. Local ties and proven results make this a natural fit. Buffalo, outgoing George Halkovich, incoming John Becker. Buffalo is a bit of an embarrassment right now. They just want to win. Plain and simple, Becker has a history of doing exactly that. He ran into some problems last year with no NIL, but after a little more success this season, he'll be back on the radar. Buffalo can pay well. It did when Oates was there, and I wouldn't worry about old off-the-court issues. Other options here include Dave Klatsky, Harvard, outgoing Tommy Amaker, incoming Mike Nardi. Nardi served as an interim coach for a few games at Villanova, going 2-1, and is now in his first year at UConn, definitely someone to watch in the Ivy League. Dave Klasky is an Ivy League alum from Penn, so Harvard would make sense as well. Air Force, outgoing Joe Scott, incoming Dan Earl. This might be a bit of career suicide, but it could also be a decade-plus opportunity at higher pay with modest expectations in a better conference. He's coached at Navy and VMI, so there's precedent, and it makes sense on both sides. FIU, outgoing Jeremy Ballard, incoming Chris Kapko. Kapko is a top SMU assistant who's also spent time at FAU and USC. A solid hire for a program looking to build credibility. Dave Klatsky is yet again another option here. Vermont, outgoing John Becker, incoming Ryan Schneider. An internal promotion, as loyal assistants who have been there for 14 years tend to get. Nothing flashy, but continuity is key. Southern Miss, outgoing Jay Ladner, incoming Stan Jones. Jones comes with a pedigree as a former Florida State and Mississippi State assistant and Memphis grad. Could be a stabilizing hire. Evansville, outgoing Dave Ragland, incoming Dean Oliver. Oliver is a Wisconsin assistant, solid mid-major pickup. Troy, outgoing Scott Cross, incoming Rod Clark. Clark has experience at Indiana and Tennessee and is viewed as a rising star. Could be a very smart move for Troy. Furman, outgoing Bob Ritchie, incoming Pat Estep. Another internal promotion. Seems to be how Furman rolls. Other options, Jeremiah Samaripas, Mark Vanderslice, and Chris Bridges. Portland, outgoing Shante Legans. Incoming Matt Logie. Logie coached at Montana State with success at both D2 and D3 levels. From the Pacific Northwest, he's familiar with the region and could be a good cultural fit. UCSB, outgoing Joe Pasternak. Incoming Rod Palmer. Palmer has experience as a UCLA and Long Beach State assistant. Seems like a strong fit. Milwaukee. Outgoing Bart Lundy. Incoming Sharif Chambliss. Chambliss has been a Wisconsin assistant and a former Milwaukee assistant, so he knows the program. Albany. Outgoing Dwayne Killings. Incoming Jared Grasso. Grasso has probably paid his dues in the wilderness. He recruited well at Bryant, though he didn't maximize talent fully. Albany is a solid landing spot for him, and Buffalo could have been an option too. Northern Arizona, outgoing Shane Burkhar, incoming Jermaine Kimbrough. Kimbrough has assistant experience at Arizona State and Loyola Chicago, could be a solid, steady hire. Northern Illinois, outgoing Rashawn Burno, incoming Mike Rohn. Rohn comes from Kansas and Colorado, giving him big conference experience to bring to the MAC. Montana State, outgoing Matt Logie, incoming Zach Payne. An internal promotion, keeping things consistent seems to be the theme here. Cal Poly, outgoing Mike DeGeorge, incoming Kyle Bossier. Internal promotion, again, continuity wins. Cal State Bakersfield, outgoing interim, incoming Mike Scott. Expect him to keep the job. Sometimes the interim just grows into the job, or at a place like this they really don't seem to care. Rod Barnes was losing there for 15 years. And that wraps up our look at the 2026 College Basketball Mock Coaching Carousel. Some of the schools that could see openings include Dayton, Kansas State, Providence, Notre Dame, Oregon State, Colorado, Richmond, Rhode Island, UMass, Northeastern, Green Bay, UC Davis, Sacred Heart, Cal State Fullerton, and Portland. All right, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you got some good insights. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to like, subscribe, and share it with anyone who'd find it useful. And don't forget to check out the resourcenexus.com for more in-depth analysis. Until next time, check you later.
Cool. Guess we'll see you around.
All right, check you later.
Bye.
Wait, man, why are you always such a dork, man?
What are you talking
Check you
about?
later. Check you later.